All right, and we're live. Welcome to the SoNo Show, episode 46, Problem Solver with Pete Quinones. Pete is a man that I've wanted to speak to for a couple of years now, and I would be remiss, I would be lying if I said some of the things that I've witnessed play out in 2023. I would be lying if I said that there were times that I was considering shutting this channel down and moving on. But my guest here, he puts out an extremely positive message, and I'm sure most of you have heard of him, but if you haven't, you should definitely check out the links in the description box below, especially his Substack material. His thoughts really resonate with me, and we agree on many things and many methods and tactics. So, without any further ado, how you doing tonight, Pete? It's an honor to have you here.
Doing great, SoNo. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good, Well, I wanted to talk, when I contacted you last week, I wanted to talk a little bit about your life, what you're willing to reveal, of course. I know you're one of the founding members of the Old Glory Club, and I seen the stream that you guys did to raise money for Appalachia. I also seen on your Twitter that you had posted a link to a GoFundMe to a couple of young people whose property and house was devastated in Marshall, North Carolina. So we really appreciate that, by the way, you talking about this. I know the mainstream media has done a really, to be honest, a piss poor job at covering this. I've talked to people and friends out in other parts of the Southeast, and they hadn't even really heard anything about this. So, Pete, I'll let you take the floor. I know you're in a rush. You've got a meeting here in an hour. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your life, about your journey.
Well, I mean, I think most people know when they hear my voice that I'm not originally from the South. Although what's funny is I meet people all the time who are like originally from the South, but then they went into the military, yada, yada, lived in certain places and like lost their accents and everything. But yeah, I'm not originally from the South, but I pretty early on studied the war between the states. And as a teenager, I knew the South was on the right side of it. So one of my goals was to get to the South after I graduated high school. As soon as I graduated high school, I moved to Florida, which South Florida is just the sixth borough of New York. So it really didn't change much from where I came from. But, after some years there, managed to make it to Atlanta. Atlanta was already going to crap when I moved there, just got 10 times worse. And by 2020, it went to crap. Decided to get out of there. Did a quick little 6-month stop in Ohio and made it down to Alabama. And I moved down here, lived in Auburn for a while. I was divorced when I left Atlanta. I met a nice Southern girl when I was living in Auburn, and we live about an hour and a half north of Auburn, and found a house, and we're just going to settle here and ride out the apocalypse.
Hey, that sounds good. I'm just curious. I know I've asked you this on your Sunday live streams in the chat before. How did your garden do this year for you?
We probably got like 50 to 60% of what we put in. Squash did pretty well. Yellow squash did pretty well in the beginning. Then the squash bugs got at it and just
those vine borers. I had to contend with those as well. They decimated my crop. It started out well, but then it just, come June, they started to burrow in. It's very destructive.
But one of the things that we discovered from a friend of mine, Rachel, in Texas, was tromboncino squash. It's more of like, you
said they get huge, don't they?
Oh, it's like we had some that were 4 feet long, and they just, literally grew like weeds. You'd see them come in, and like 3 days later, they're 3 feet long. And
that's crazy.
they're great. They have a nicer taste. You know, squash has a tendency to have just a very not much of a taste at all. This had like a slight taste to it. It's also a lot easier to spiral because it stays a little harder. And yeah, those, I mean, we had tons of those. I think tomatoes, I don't remember what the last count I think I remembered was we got about 55 or 60 pounds of tomatoes.
Nice.
What else? Yeah, we had some peppers, bell peppers, not a lot of those. A lot of hot peppers like serrano peppers and things like that.
Yeah.
And then like later in the summer, the green beans just started coming in like crazy. And we still have to do some green beans and everything. But yeah, we'll have we have 4 raised beds right now for next season. We're planning on having a couple more and everything.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah, we'll see what
That's awesome. Trumbuccino squash. I'm gonna remember that because my wife, she's into spiraling, you know, using it for her dishes that she prepares. Pete, I wanted to go back. I think I have heard you mention before. It was in the Bader Meinhof stream, the series that you did with Thomas. Were you actually born in West Germany?
Mm-hmm. I was born in the Bundesrepublik. Yeah, Heidelberg. I was actually. What's funny is I have like all these things with Patton. I share a birthday with General Patton. I was born in the hospital that he died in. A couple.
There's a lot of history there. I think I'd heard you mention as a comment telling Thomas, you know, this is something that's really interested me the last few years, is the differences between West Germany, the Bundesrepublik, and East Germany. You know, I've always heard these horror stories about just how terrible it was behind the Iron Curtain. But it was in January of last year, I interviewed a content creator. He's a few years older than me, and he grew up in, I believe it's Leipzig. It's behind the Iron Curtain. Yeah. And he revealed something interesting to me. He said that when he first, after 1991, when he first got to visit and tour what was West Germany, he said that he was not very impressed. He said he had never seen a Turk before, and he said he was not impressed. He was not impressed with the people that were his age. He was raised, I believe, Catholic, if I remember correctly. And he said they were just really atheistic, the kids that were his age. He said in a weird sort of way, it was like being behind the Iron Curtain preserved a sense of nationalism in a weird sort of way. Did you ever venture into East Germany, or your parents perhaps, for any reason?
My mother went into East Germany. Checkpoint Charlie. She said that the year she was going would have been 67, 68, 69. She said that she didn't really have any problems. You know, there were, they checked your car and everything, the mirror underneath, but there were a lot of really nice museums over there that she enjoyed going to. And that's why she would go over there. And my dad went over a couple times just to visit. He went over undercover without letting anyone know that he was, in the military and everything like that. He wasn't a spy. I mean, he was intelligence, but he wasn't like that intelligence. And they both liked it. And another thing that's interesting about it is that when you look right now at the sections of Germany that are most resistant to the woke, it's all the ones that used to be the DDR.
Yes.
It's all, they just wouldn't, they're not putting up with it because they basically, people want to say, oh, they grew up these are people who grew up. Yeah, bad stuff happened, but bad stuff happened on the West Side too.
Oh yeah.
And, it's like Francis Parker Yockey said. He said, if you grew up if you're going to live in the West after the war, after World War II, I mean, if you're going to live in the East, if you're going to live in the Soviet Union, if you're going to live behind the Iron Curtain, they might take your body, but on the other side of the curtain, they're going to take your soul.
That's a brilliant way to put it. Yes.
Yeah. And you're just, your soul is going to be eaten away. So, people had a chance to basically keep their customs, and especially in the DDR, there's some great if you just like Google pictures of the DDR,
Yes.
and you'll just see like beautiful architecture, women in mini skirts, stuff. I mean, you will be shocked that a lot of what you were told is total bullshit. So.
Yeah, I know. Just the other day, I seen on Telegram, Thomas had posted it was a picture of it was, I guess, affiliated with the government. I can't remember the specific name, but it was of this brilliant marching band. They had these beautiful uniforms. They were playing out in front of this some sort of estate. And this was in, I believe, the mid to late 80s. So, it's like you don't see anything about, you wouldn't see anything like that probably in West Germany, or you would see some sort of corrupted and contemptible sort of version of it.
Well, it's a westernized kind of version that you would get in Germany. You're just getting you know, you're getting what the beginnings of what Globo Homo wants you to see. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, my mother loved West Germany, but my mother loved Austria more than anything. My mother used to go to Vienna all the time, and she actually
Yeah.
tried to convince my dad to stay in Vienna. She said, when you get out of the military, can you get out here so we can stay here and live in Vienna? And my dad convinced her to come back to the States. So I always wonder what my life would have been like if I'd have been raised in Vienna, or if my name would have been like my dad wanted to name me Stanislav. So
Really?
what would that have been like?
Wow. That's interesting. Definitely. There was one of your streams here recently you had on Clay Martin, and it was a really fascinating stream. I really enjoyed it. It was talking about, I mean, I don't mean to sound, aggressive or whatever, but it was talking about how violence is used and things of that nature. What I consider sort of like primordial truths. I remember you. Did you say you worked as a teenager at Yankee Stadium for a brief time?
I did. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, from the time I was 14 till I was 18. Yeah, so
Yeah.
4 years. But you don't work year round. You only work during the
During
season,
baseball
which is
season.
4
Yeah.
months. So yeah.
That's pretty cool. I guess would this have been in like the 80s, I guess, the 70s? I was about to say if you were there in like 77,
80s.
you would have seen Reggie. Okay,
Yeah.
that was a few years
It was
later.
the 80s. Yeah, I remember Reggie. I remember Reggie. I met Reggie a couple times. Good
Did
guy.
you?
Always
Nice.
signed autographs for everyone, and very personable kind of guy. Also, the Hispanics really liked him a lot because Reggie was half Hispanic and knew how to speak Spanish, so he would stop and talk to them for half hour and just shoot the shit and everything. So yeah, he was a very nice guy. Nothing bad to say about him. Nothing bad to say about most of the Yankees that I met when I was working there. Greg Nettles was an asshole, but yeah, pretty much
Really?
everybody was
Oh
cool.
man.
Yeah.
I never was a fan of the Yankees myself as a kid. I was always a Braves fan, which is pretty typical for my part of the South. But they had some great teams throughout their history. Yeah, I like the story that you had told about your father. He defended your honor against that, uh, some of the wildlife who were trying to accost you as you were just making a call on a payphone. Um, and I've heard you talk a lot about. Go ahead.
Somebody in the YouTube comments, said that my dad was wrong for that because, he didn't throw the first punch. The guy didn't throw the first punch. But I'm like, a threat's a threat, and if you pop off at the mouth,
Yeah.
especially in that environment, okay. If you pop off in, Atlanta or something, where if you pop off in a predominantly white neighborhood, well, first of all, you're not going to pop off. Okay.
Yeah.
This is an area that is known for violence. You have to know how to fight. And you're better off just cut it. You're better off dealing with it before it gets bad. You're better off doing it like a preemptive strike. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to talk for just a few minutes about your political journey. You used to be a libertarian, and this is something I understand I've heard in your streams. You go off on the libertarians these days. I know during this, I've seen this on Twitter just in the past week. There was Hurricane Helene. It affected places like Augusta, Georgia, on up into upstate South Carolina, Appalachia here in East Tennessee, Western North Carolina. There was a video that was making the rounds. It was of these, I suppose, Indian gas station owners charging $10 a gallon for gas. And this should evoke a sort of righteous anger. But then I see some of the people in the comments, they talk about, oh, this is free market. This is the free market. If you support, price controls, if you support rationing, that's communism. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, and I checked their profiles. They're all libertarians. They're all about my free market. So I understand. I see firsthand what you were talking about with some of these issues. But anyways,
and I wouldn't even make a point about the pricing there. If the gas station owner was white from that area, like grew up in that area and was like, look, just told people, look, I'm raising it a few dollars just so that, we can save it. We have enough to go
Nobody
around. Or, the
yet.
best thing to do is just ration.
Yeah.
Say, look, you're allowed to get 10 gallons and that's it and everything. But it's an outsider. It's somebody who's not from this culture, has no idea what the cultural mores are. And it really, stuff like that really goes to prove that when you have multiculturalism, you're going to have friction. You're going to run into things like that. You're going to run into people who just don't care. Trey Garrison, is it Trey Garrison? I think his name is Trey Garrison. He wrote the book Opioids for the Masses, and
yes,
he's Spectre on the right stuff. And one of the things that he pointed out in that book was that when they were looking to push opioids to the white populations, especially in West Virginia, they did it through using Indian and foreign doctors, because they knew that they weren't going to ask any questions. They weren't going to be like, well, is this actually good for my people? Because they don't have people. And there's a chance that somebody who's from there, who's been a doctor in that area, who's delivered, maybe delivered half the population, will ask questions like that. But no, they went directly to people who were not from there. So I think that really speaks to culture. I mean, the whole free market, I don't care about the whole free market thing is, if you want to deal with that, you ration, you tell them, look, you can only get this much, or this is what we're charging. But when like I said, you have to have, if you import another culture, you're going to bring, and you're importing somebody else's cultural, mores. You don't want to do that. There's going to be friction. People are going to get, people can get killed, over stuff like that. And this isn't only for the host population. This is for the population that you're allowing to come in here. It's not fair to them either. They should be where they should be with their people.
Exactly. I mean, I've always heard this statistic as well, that say our porous southern border, they come in with a family comes in, they drop, who knows, 4 or 6 kids. After a generation, though, those kids are more Americanized. They're not going to have children like their parents did. They may have 1 or 2 if they have any at all. It just appears that,
there's this weird thing, and Francis Marco Yaki talks about it in Imperium. He doesn't explain it either. He doesn't try to explain it, because there really is, I don't know how you explain it. Whenever a population is, and I just read an article by Martin Van Creveld on my podcast called War and Migration, and basically migration is war. And it appears that whenever large groups are whenever mass migration is sent into an existing culture, that culture stops having kids.
Yeah.
They stop reproducing. And I think one of the reasons is because when you bring people in like that, it raises the prices of everything.
Yes, it
And
does.
I mean, that's one reason. And I think there's also some kind of metaphysical reason where it's like, oh, well, why should I be having kids when there's all these people? There's something weird about that. But I love that Yaki wrote about that and didn't even try to explain it. He just said, this is what happens. It's happened in every civilization that he could bring up. Strange.
You know, that's interesting. I have yet to read Imperium, but I just have sort of a basic understanding of it. I've read a few excerpts. I do think that I think Yaki was correct in a lot of his observations. Let's see. So, about your political journey, let me ask you this real quick. Have you ever heard of a book called Empire of Pain? I can't find you the author right now, but
No.
you mentioned Spector's book about the opioid crisis, but there's a book called Empire of Pain, and it documents I read it about 3 years ago. It documents the Sackler family when they came over here to America. The patriarch of that family was named Mortimer Sackler, and I suppose during his time back in the 40s and 50s, they really didn't market drugs. Like, you can just see the advertisements if you've got cable TV. Oh, this drug here, it's Truvada, it's PrEP, it'll keep a homosexual from getting AIDS, but you're going to grow a foot out of your head with all these crazy sort of side effects. But it started with terramycin, which I believe is an antibiotic. This was back in the 50s. And it's fascinating. The author goes to show like how Oxycontin was marketed. A lot of the same sort of marketing tactics for terramycin back in the 50s and 60s was employed. It's a good book. If you ever, I know you've got a lot of books people recommend to you, but it's a pretty revealing book. But anyways, back to Pete's political journey. If you want to elaborate on that.
Well, I mean, I grew up in a household where, my mom's my dad's parents weren't around. They lived outside the country, but my mom's parents were, they were your typical kind of JFK Democrats.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in New York, it's very Democrat. Growing up, even though you had these Democrats who were like hyper racist and were just yeah. So but when Reagan came along, my dad was like, that's our guy and everything like that. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that Reagan, some of the stuff that he did was just absolutely
amnesty.
Insane.
Yeah.
Amnesty, the machine gun ban and everything like that. But in the as the 90s went on and everything like that, I wasn't like a big fan of Bill Clinton, but I wasn't really a big fan of politics either. I was doing stuff. I was playing music and playing in some bands, hanging out at clubs, doing a lot of things. It wasn't really till 9/11 that politics started coming on my radar, like that I would actually read books about politics. And I was reading normie stuff. I read an Ann Coulter book though in like 2002. It was talking about immigration. So I was pretty much up on the immigration thing until I became a libertarian. And then it's like, oh, well, you can't love the police. So the police enforce the borders. And but yeah, after 9/11, like on 9/11, a buddy of mine that I worked with who was actually like a juggalo. He was like a legit juggalo.
Insane clown posse.
Oh yeah. He pulls me aside and he goes, dude, this was Osama Bin Laden. And he starts explaining to me who Osama Bin Laden is. And so, yeah, he was a juggalo. He loved ICP, but he was also a really smart dude.
Yeah.
So, I started looking into things, but the Iraq war didn't really make any sense to me because I was hearing the arguments against. I liked Jesse Ventura for no other reason than he was a wrestler, and I used to watch him wrestle. And I was listening to his arguments, and they made sense to me. And so I didn't really like that war. And then the war starts, and what can you do after the war starts? And then, I saw Ron Paul in 2007 at the debates, and it made a lot of sense to me what he was saying. So I ordered a book of his speeches on foreign policy, and that made a lot of sense to me that, we just meddling and we're basically going to war for other people. He didn't say that, but you could really infer it. And I've always been, growing up in New York, living in South Florida, let's just say that the JQ has always been there for me. Even I used to get in trouble in my house because my parents were anti-racist, and I was I noticed things at a very I noticed things at a very young age. And like 1998, I started reading Mark Weber and the Institute for Historical Research. So I was reading about the Halabunga. Yeah. And so I knew about that. But then again, it came up to being a libertarian, and libertarians teach you look at everybody as an individual. You don't put people into groups. It's like, it's a really, I call libertarianism like the de-radicalization scheme for high IQ white guys.
Really?
Like
that's a pretty good assessment.
You get into libertarianism, and it's like, oh, well, you can't look at groups now. You have to judge everybody as an individual, and the police can't do anything good because, they're welfare whores, and, the military isn't good, and there's nothing, and so, yeah, he said, Florida or New York is not the place to be if you want to get away from them.
Yeah. It's like,
no kidding. And then you go to Atlanta, and you find out that they have one of the oldest populations for them in the South, and but yeah, so then I was studying libertarianism from like 2007 to 2010, 2011. I went to some events. I met Tom Woods and Lou Rockwell, Ron Paul, and all these people. But I didn't have a podcast or anything like that. And then for a few years, I just did nothing but work. I wasn't political. When Ron Paul's 2012 campaign rolled around, I wasn't involved at all. I wasn't following it. When 2016 rolled around, I started paying attention again, because I'm like, so Donald Trump got the nomination and he's going against Hillary Clinton. What a sideshow this is going to be. Okay, so
yeah,
I fired up my old Twitter account, and just started like posting memes and stuff like that. And people started following me, and people liked the memes. They're very libertarian kind of memes, nothing too offensive.
Yeah.
Around 20, as soon as when Trump gets elected, I'm watching all this happen and everything, and I'm watching, and then he bombs Syria, and you got all this crap happening, and I'm like, I listen to Tom Woods. I've been listening to Tom Woods' podcast for a while. I had started listening to Dave Smith's podcast, and I'm like, well, I used to record music, and now they have soft. I played guitar and I sang. But I was a better bass player than anything else. I started out playing bass. What was the final straw for libertarianism was 2020, was COVID. So I'm like, all right, well, I can record, and now software is digital, so it's not like I'm doing it with a 4-track, like a 4-track recorder, which is funny because I actually have a Tascam Mixcast 4, so that I record my local stuff, and I have a preset effects, compression, reverb, and everything like that. So I actually have a record now. I have a recorder again, like a desktop recorder again. But one of the reasons I got this is for this.
Oh yeah, there we go.
So I could have a soundboard. But it records my voice locally, and it sounds really good because it doesn't have to go through the internet and go through all sorts of degradation and everything. But yeah, so I just decided, well, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to do like 15-minute episodes and just talk about like the basics of libertarianism. I got like 17 episodes in and I was like, well, I don't really have anything more to talk about. And Tom Wood says if you make it past 7 episodes, you're pretty much home free. So I noticed like there was a former cop on Twitter who was like a libertarian, and his name's Rayford Davis, and he had in his profile, if you want to talk, if you wanted me to come on your show, email me or contact me. So I contacted him, and then I just started going and interviews and just started getting interviews, and I actually got Scott Horton. I interviewed him on the day Fool's Errand, his first book, came out. And he put that interview on his website, Libertarian Institute. And that's when I started growing.
That's when you started getting traction.
Started growing. Yeah. Started getting, and then I wrote a little book, which is not available anymore because it's fucking embarrassing. And Dave Smith had me on to talk about it, and Tom Woods had me on to talk about it. And as soon as I was on both of those shows, my everything just blew up. So yeah, so that was it. That was the everybody asks, oh, how do you grow the show? I'm like, well, first of all, you have to be doing something that people want to listen to.
Yes.
I also think it helps to have a nice voice for podcasting too. I've been told that I have a very nice voice for podcasting. Yeah,
you have a very radiogenic voice. I don't know if that's if that's even a term, but yeah.
Tom Wood said I have like the perfect, like if I had a radio show where I was reading like old like spooky stories and stuff at night, he'd listen to it. And then you want to get yourself out there in front of people, and you want to do something to, we made a documentary. I wrote a couple books which are complete garbage and will never see the light of day ever again.
I wouldn't say that. I'm sure they're fine.
But they're really cringe. But the and then it just it accelerated from there. But I started questioning libertarianism. I was like, look, things are not getting better, and libertarianism is like more people are becoming libertarians, and the world is getting worse. So I was like, what do we have to do? I'm not a Democrat. I don't believe in democracy. What do we do? So I started looking at like Paul Gottfried. I had Paul Gottfried on a couple times in 2019 and everything. And I was really questioning using dropping the term libertarian. I think I had Jeff Deist on, and we talked about that. And then 2020 happened and COVID happened. And I was one of the first people to talk about it. I have podcasts about COVID in February of 2020 where myself and Monica Perez are just talking about how, this is going to be about vaccines and vaccine passports and things like that. And we called a lot of it. We actually underplayed it. A lot more happened than we thought. And then, I just saw that if people would allow themselves to be locked down, then people are
conditioned to be docile,
and they want to be. So and also they're waiting to be told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And libertarians are not going to tell people what to do. They consider it to be anathema. So I'm like, well, I mean, if libertarians aren't going to be able to tell people if you're not going to tell people what to do and what to believe and how to act, well, I mean, that seems to be what they want. And I may not be the guy who can do that. I may not be the person, the leader who can do that, but I can talk about it and maybe, trigger that next person who becomes, a great leader or, something like that. Maybe I could talk to the next, I don't know, the next Francisco Franco will hear my voice or something like that. So
you could be a catalyst.
So I don't want to be a politician. I'd rather be the person who whispers in a politician's ear. But, as soon as I realize that people are not going to choose to be free. They want to be told what to do, and not all of them, obviously, but the overwhelming majority prove that. Then libertarianism really has nothing for me. And strangely, and I was talking with a friend of mine today, and I've had him on the show reading Coup d'etat by Lutwak, John Fieldhouse.
Yes.
And we were saying that we think that, we may end up that this could end up going towards a more libertarian society, but it is going to end, it's going to have to be, cultural. It's going to have to be monocultural. It's going to, a lot of people are going to have to be kicked out of the country. A lot of people are going to have to be just excluded from it. And, it's like, someone was, oh, how can you want to tell people what, it's like, well, how do you expect a Haitian who is like, has average 67 IQ to even understand libertarianism when they can't understand hypotheticals? And it's like, and I don't want that person, if we set up a community, I don't want somebody like that in my community. You have to pass laws in order to tell them what not to do. That's not what laws are for. Laws are just for people who share the same culture. We put these down as this is what we believe. This is what laws have never stopped people from committing crimes.
Exactly. That's true.
You just formalize things. So it's like, I mean, I don't, that's one of the problems I have with libertarians too, is they refuse to recognize culture, people of very low IQ. And I'm not saying that a civilization or a culture that's below ours couldn't raise their IQ, because it's obvious. We have evidence that IQs raise up very quickly in areas that are inhabited by white people and white people teach their culture and show them that shit has never worked in Haiti. So it's like, okay, why would I want that person? Why would I want sub-Saharans? Why would I import these people if I want to see order, when these people don't come from places that have order and they don't know what order is?
Yeah.
So that's one of the problems with libertarians too. Yeah, libertarians are not going to even talk about the fact that, hey, let's look at the crime statistics in the United States. People don't, who commits the most murders, and why are they such a small fraction of the population? Who controls the media and porn and Hollywood and all of these things, and why are they even fractional, like 2.5%? And it's like, well, you don't want to, nobody wants to talk about that. Why do you? Oh, well, they're just successful. That's how they get there. Well, if they're successful, how come every time they touch something, it turns to shit?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, that's not success. There's this old movie called Joe versus the Volcano with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. And it's a really weird movie. I would not recommend it to people unless you like really weird movies. But there's this really weird character played by Danny Hedaya called Mr. Wattori. And he just keeps saying on the phone, he's arguing with someone. He goes, I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? And he keeps saying that over and over again. And I look at these people who work for the Biden administration and run the Secretary of Defense, the Defense Secretary, the Department of Homeland Security. And I'm like, well, they could get the job, but apparently they either can't do the job or they're perfectly malicious in not doing the job.
Their destruction.
Basically doing the exact opposite of what their job is.
Exactly. That was a really good, I wanted to shout out your Substack for a minute. That was a really good article that you had read. I think it was from American Renaissance about the history of Haiti. I sent that one to my mother back up in Northwest North Carolina, and she enjoyed it. That was a very thorough article, because I had heard bits and pieces about the history of Haiti, but honestly, here in Appalachia, extreme southern Appalachia, where I live now, I've only interacted with one Haitian in my life, and it was a lady that worked at the local Mexican restaurant. And I could tell that she was definitely not full-blooded Haitian. She was a mulatto of some kind. She actually, I thought she had a sort of like
Haitians kill their mulattoes.
Yeah.
Haitians in the past have killed their mulattoes. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of racial strife. Mulattoes are, it was fascinating, that article that you had read about how just the history, the mulattoes versus the whites versus the native Haitians. So see, it's like it appears to me that racism is something that they'll never get rid of it. You know, there's always going to be people that are going to view their shades of skin, and it's not just skin color, of course. It's so many other things. But I appreciated that. It's very worth listening to. I wanted to talk a minute about one of your recent Substack videos. It was the War of Myths. And it was a couple of Sundays ago. I was just playing outside with my daughter, and I was listening. Someone brought up the moon landing. Now, myself, I've not really looked into the moon landing. I didn't really care to, but I liked what you had said. Just a quick question. Have you ever read Myth of the 20th Century by Alfred Rosenberg? You ever checked that book out?
I've not read it. I mean, I know the book. I just haven't had a chance to read it. No,
it's a long book. I've only read about half of it, and this was a couple of years ago. But it's a fascinating book, and this is what exposed me to the concept of myth and its importance. And I love what you said about the moon landing. Your thoughts on it,
Mr.
If you want to,
this is written by. Go ahead. This is written by Mr. Rosenberg, who was hung in 1947, right?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes. Him.
Or is it? Yeah. Or is it 45? What was it? It was 47, right? Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
I think it was 46 or 47. I know whenever they asked him.
Yeah, it might be 46. Yeah.
Whenever they asked
I just wanted to make sure it was I just wanted to make sure it was the Alfred Rosenberg I was thinking of.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're correct. I love it how they asked him if he had any final words. You know, as he's up there on the gallows, and he's just like, nope. Defiant. He's like, I have nothing to say to you. But I'll let you explain to the audience. What do you think about the moon landing, Pete? What do you think about it?
I think that even if it didn't happen, shut the fuck up.
Damn right.
White people,
I love that.
White people accomplish something, and more that I think about the people who are trying to say that it didn't happen, or people that whoever started this, it's coming from an anti-white place. And I think that you stick with the moon landing all the way, and you say, look at what white people did, no matter what the movie Hidden Figures says. Bird and I have talked about watching the movie Hidden Figures on a live stream and commenting on it, but we know we'll probably get arrested by the FBI if we do that.
I've not seen Hidden Figures. I need to look that up. I'd like to check that out. Let's see here.
No, you don't. It's about how a group like 4 black women got us to the moon.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. I don't need to waste my time on that. You know. Let's see. This is a random question. What is your favorite movie, Pete? What's
that's
a broad question. I know.
You can take the kid out of New York, but you can't take New York out of the kid. It's either Goodfellas or The Godfather part 1 or 2, depending on. It's one of those 3. I tend to think 2 is better than 1. Godfather 2 is better than 1. But 1 is what sets everything up. But Goodfellas is like you can't just sit down with anybody and watch The Godfather, because there's a lot of slow parts and people might get.
You got to pay attention.
But people are sucked. Yeah. But people are sucked in by Goodfellas right from the start, because it's good music, good dialogue, and it's really snappy.
Yeah, it's up there. It's one of my favorites. You mentioned earlier you were talking about the Jewish population in South Florida. The line where the hairdresser lady at that the guys, their little women's get together. She's like, "Hey, I just got back from Miami," and Karen's like, "Oh, what'd you think about it?" And she's like, "Oh, it's like I died and went to Jew heaven." Oh, that line always stuck with me. Yeah. Let's see here. I got a couple of notes here. I was going to say, I wanted to ask you this. This is something I know we're kind of going in the weeds, but I know you've got to go in a few. Have you ever seen True Detective? You ever got into that show?
Mm-hmm. First and second season. Man, I didn't watch the third season. No.
I just finished the first season, and it was It's up there with one of my favorite series. It is.
I mean,
a lot of
it's hard to watch, though. I mean, as I get older, I really don't want to watch things that have an insane amount of violence in it anymore.
Yeah.
It's just because it sticks with you and everything. But I've already seen it, so I would watch it again, even though it's just it's disturbing.
It's dark.
Like my wife couldn't make it through like the first 20 minutes of the first episode, and I respect her for that.
I know I've studied the Dutroux affair in Belgium that happened back in the 80s and 90s. There's a really good work that was put out by a guy named Joel van der Rijden. It was called Beyond the Dutroux Affair, and it discusses all the links between the SDRA-8, which was the Belgian incarnation of Gladio. There's so many links. That show actually reminded me a lot of how these sort of grotesque pedophilic networks, like how they exposed it. Rust, his just tireless pursuit of these people. And, I'm from a very conservative area. Everybody wants to talk about Epstein or Diddy. That's in the news. You want to see something horrific, look back at the Dutroux affair, the Brabant killers. There's links between
Thomas and
those.
Thomas and I just recorded this afternoon the last episode of Gladio, and one of the last things we talked about was he was talking about the groups that were going into like supermarkets, robbing them of like $200 and killing everyone in there.
Yes,
and then I mentioned Dutroux. And it's very odd that you're bringing these up because this is just what we were talking about this afternoon.
there's links between let's see Patrick, who you had on Surviving Vimerica, to talk about the years of lead last year. That's what really put the hook in me. He's one of my best friends. He's been here to visit. We had an interesting we had an interesting incursion in Atlanta, Georgia, when I went to pick him up. We about got hustled, and if it hadn't been daylight, they may have. It's something called the Reflector Boys. It's black people that dress up in construction outfits. They put a vest on, and they will try to hustle you. They're like, hey, I had to pick him up at a Greyhound bus station in downtown Atlanta. I avoid Atlanta like the plague. But as I'm walking up there looking for him, a bunch of them come around me. They're like, hey, you owe us money for parking. And I'm like, fuck no, I don't owe you money. I parked 2-3 blocks away at a titty bar. I don't owe you a damn thing. And they thankfully left us alone. But anyways, I wanted to go. I know I just wanted to throw that story in. I wanted to give a shout out for Patrick too. I appreciate you having him on. He's who got me into looking into a lot of this stuff about 3-4 years ago. But the links between Gladio or the SDRA-8, the Brabant killers, they all revolve around a guy whose name was Paul Latinus. The Westland New Post. That's where the links between Dutroux, the SDRA-8. I mean, have you ever heard of a guy named the Black Baron? His name was Benoit de Bonvoisin. No. A very grotesque human being who was mentioned numerous times in the Dutroux affair. He was probably clicked up with the CIA and things like that. He's mentioned numerous times of just an absolute scumbag pedophile. But he was a prominent fascist. He was also allegedly a member of Opus Dei, which William Colby, former CIA director, was also a member of Opus Dei, who died under strange circumstances. But I know William Colby, he encouraged John DeCamp, that senator from Nebraska, during the the Franklin child abuse case. Yes. There's a lot of interesting links in there. I'd love to hear you guys do an episode on the Brabant killers and Dutroux. I'd like to hear you guys' take on that for sure. But anyways, I didn't mean to go off on that tangent.
All right. No
I know you've got a few minutes. I know you got to roll in a few minutes. I want you.
I got 10 minutes.
Care. Okay. Well, I want to take this last 10 minutes because you've really broadened my horizons the last couple of years, Pete. back in February, you had King Peeled on. You talked about the PayPal Mafia. This is a concept I'd never heard of. If you would explain to my audience what the PayPal Mafia is and how that they could benefit us by, as you put it, knocking down some walls for us.
Well, PayPal Mafia, you can just go to Wikipedia and you'll see a list of people. Just put in Wikipedia, put in PayPal Mafia, and it'll come up. Put it in Google or wherever you want. PayPal Mafia is just basically the people who became billionaires and very wealthy around PayPal, and also people who were on the outskirts of it. You know, people who were also like, there's no way PayPal could have done what it did if it wasn't for eBay. So you have all of these, you know, basically these Silicon Valley people that hung around with each other back in, you know, starting in some of the late 80s. And are you getting me?
Yeah.
Okay. So we think of them as like, you know, buddy of mine says they're the new robber barons. Oh, they made all their money doing.
I think it might be on my end.
Okay.
Are you there?
What's going on?
Hello. I think it.
Yeah. What's going on?
I'm not sure if it's on my end. It might be on my end. I know. Can you hear me, Pete? Is everything coming in? Hello, hello.
I can hear you.
Let me see here. Oh, you can hear me. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what was up with my internet. I think it was on my end, possibly. I apologize. But yeah, people like Peter Thiel, that's a name that evokes a lot of suspicion, especially in like the circles that I have roamed around in. Let's see.
Yes, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't Peter Thiel? Was he I know he had Palantir and might be Smart Check AI. Was he also involved in PayPal, or am I mistaken there?
Yes, he was involved in PayPal. Yes. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
You hear me? Yep.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. Yeah, he was involved in PayPal. So
I don't know what's going on, guys. I apologize. Yeah. It's interesting.
But can you hear me now? You hear me when I'm talking right now?
Misbehaving for some strange reason. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, it's cutting in and out. Okay.
Okay. Well, I don't think it's me. Even though I'm on Starlink, it's everything's fine here. The weather's been perfectly fine.
You're coming in perfectly fine now.
Okay.
I think I just.
Yeah, my speed is.
Yeah, mine's a little slow at the moment. I apologize. I don't know why it's just doing this.
Yeah, my internet's perfectly fine. So, yeah. So just PayPal Mafia, real quick. It seems that they started making moves. They started the first move that you can really see is you can see that Musk buying Twitter, because that's where it's basically the town square for politics. Narratives go there to live and to die, to be born and to die. And then you just see people who, were hanging around Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy, and you start seeing that they start talking about supporting Trump and everything. And then somebody says, it looks like there's like an elite. Somebody on Twitter says, it looks like there's an elite takeover, and it's coming from an elite attempted takeover coming from Silicon Valley. And Mark Andreessen, who is not part of I don't think he's part of the PayPal Mafia, but he retweets that with a bullseye. Then he retweets the bullseye with a screenshot of a couple James Burnham books. And, there it's like, all right, well, these people aren't backing, although Andreessen's partner on his podcast is backing Kamala Harris. And Andreessen and all these people seem to be backing Trump. We know that Elon Musk is backing Trump. I mean, he's touring with him now. He just did an interview with Tucker Carlson. He says that if Trump, and Tucker, I thought one of the most interesting things was Tucker said if you back Trump and he loses, they're going to get you. He said, well, if I don't back him and he loses, they're going to get me anyway. So, it seems like there is this group that prizes above all, it seems to me, competence. And they want the country to be competent again. They want the country to be free to do business again. They want the military to be strong again. And, I look at them and I'm like, not necessarily my friends. But definitely not who I would choose. But if they can displace this just god awful regime that hates me, even if they kind of don't like me, it's better than hating me. And if they're like radically indifferent to me, well, then that's fine.
That's an improvement. Like that. That's an improvement out of compared to outright hatred. Well, hell, Pete, it's about. We've only got about 4.5 minutes before you have to go. Do you have any last thoughts? Everybody, I put the links to all of Pete's varied social media platforms in the description box below. I know most of you have heard of them already, but to anyone that hasn't, give his work a check. Check out his work because it's really positive. I like how you put it, Pete. You've got the naming, the noticing is at an all-time high. You had Trump talking about mass deportations, and it's like, are you black-pilled? How can you be black-pilled right now? Look at how far we've moved the ball down the field since, say, even 4, definitely 8, 10 years ago. So any parting thoughts, Pete? I'll let you get out of here. I know you're a busy man.
I will say this, that anybody who says that truth is more important than being in power is a loser. And they're a loser. Anyone who cares more about truth than the narrative doesn't necessarily have to be 100% true, is a loser. You don't have power right now. You don't know how power works, and you'll never be in power, and your life will just be worse for it. Get the fuck out of the way and let people who know what power is and what narratives are and who might skirt the truth a little bit make life better for you, because there's no way by saying truth is more important to me that you're going to make life better for yourself. That's it.
Excellent. Well, Pete, I want to thank you once again for coming on here and talking to my small channel. I really appreciate it. And hey, I was going to say the door is always open. I'd love to have you. I wish we could talk I could talk to you for probably 3-4 hours. But yeah, I want to thank you as always, Pete. And I'll be in touch here soon. Maybe one day.
Anytime, man.
Yeah, maybe one day I wouldn't mind coming on your stream and talking about maybe Matewan or some Appalachian history, or maybe some some Gladio, things like that. Anything, I'd be interested. I think I could give you a good show. But anyways, thank you as always, Pete.
You got access to my DMs.
Anytime. All right, sounds good. And care, you have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. I want to thank everybody as well that has came by, stopped in. I wish we could talk more, but I will might have another show next weekend. Hope y'all have a great evening. Bye-bye.